Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Finding Your Power Through Your Voice session. You can interact and ask questions via the chat function. Please remember that all of our sessions at GVCC are meant to be informational, and any treatment decisions should be made with your healthcare team. My name is Jess. I'm a colon cancer survivor, and I have a PALB2 genetic mutation. The first time that I shared my story publicly was December of 2017, which was 5 years after my diagnosis. I was absolutely terrified, and I wasn't even talking. My story was written out and printed next to a picture in my gallery. I remember it being the very first time during my cancer journey that I didn't feel alone. I was in a room with about 100 people, all of whom who had been affected by cancer in some form or another, and it was so powerful. I met Dave Craig, one of the founders and CEO of GRYT Health, that night. I started working here a few weeks later, and I have been chasing that high ever since. In 2018, I started the Tell Your Story program at GRYT Health. I'm definitely more comfortable being behind the scenes, and my main job here at GRYT Health is working on education and empowerment, which basically means I do the back end work with all of the virtual conferences. In just a moment, I'm going to turn the mic over to our first speaker. Before I do that, I'm going to read an excerpt from the TED Talks. All right. Almost everyone has experienced the fear of public speaking. It's because there's a lot at stake, not just the experience in the moment, but in our longer term reputation. How others think of us matters hugely. We are profoundly social animals. We crave each other's affection, respect, and support. Our future happiness depends on these realities to a shocking degree. The only thing that truly matters in public speaking is not confidence, stage presence, or smooth talking. It's having something worth saying. All of our speakers here have something worth saying. They're going to be sharing their stories and their experiences with you, which takes a lot of courage. Please make sure to use the chat to give them support and encouragement. We will drop the link in the chat to our website. If you're interested in sharing your story with us in the future, you can do so here. All right, and now without further ado, please welcome our panelists and speakers, starting first with Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine. I am a now 43-year-old mother of one. I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma blood cancer that affects the plasma cells in your bone marrow in August of 2015 when I was 28 weeks pregnant with my son. At the time, we had no idea what was in store because the life expectancy was 3 to 5 years at the time for that kind of cancer. And so I didn't think I'd see my son start school or any of that. So it was a hard time for me. We had him 5 weeks early at 35 weeks. And then 5 weeks after that, I started my induction chemotherapy. Then in May of 2016, I started the stem cell transplant process of high dose of chemo and having my healthier stem cells taken out once they had rebuilt. And then finally in June 6th of 2016, I had my stem cell transplant where I got my healthy stem cells back. And ever since then, I have luckily stayed stable. Of course, your numbers are going to fluctuate every time you go in to have your labs done, which for me is every other week since I am on a maintenance chemotherapy basically for the rest of my life, and I go every other week. It is 6 years later after my diagnosis, and in January of 2000, I had applied to go on a hiking trek with the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. And at that time, I didn't think I'd get placed, and I did. And I was supposed to go to Greenland in July of that year, but then of course the pandemic happened. But I still kept up with training. And then about a year ago, I started running again. I used to be very active. And I am in the works to be running my first half marathon in January. I'm training at this time right now. I was told too that I would never be able to run or do any high impact sports ever again. And I'm here to say that I, with a little grit, can still do some high impact. I just have to listen to my body and make sure that I'm okay. Another thing too is that multiple myeloma, I did not know anything about it at the time. It is typically a male 60 and over cancer. And I was a 37-year-old pregnant woman. So I'm here to say that no cancer is a typical cancer to a certain age group or anything like that. Nowadays we are all over the place. I mean, I've known of a 5-year-old girl who has multiple myeloma or had multiple myeloma. So just know that you can do anything, stay positive, keep your advocacy going, and just keep doing what you want to do. It'll really help you. And that's about it that I have. I think I've done less than my time.
Thanks, Kristen. That was great. All right, now I'm going to, oh, sorry. You're good. All right, so next speaker we're going to have today is Pamela. Can you unmute yourself?
Hi. Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. So I am Pamela Spain, and I am in the Raleigh, North Carolina area in Research Triangle Park, and I am a health services researcher by training. For about 15 years now, I've done cancer research, looking at quality measures and access to care and access to high quality care, and how do you measure high quality care for people with cancer. And in September of 2017, I became one of those people with cancer as a researcher. I was diagnosed with stage 3B breast cancer. I had several tumors and lymph node involvement. So it was pretty startling, but at the same time, I was unwaveringly positive all throughout it. And I think that was mainly due to my experience as a researcher and talking with providers all throughout the country for many, many years, and seeing, like I said, since 15 years ago, how much cancer treatment has progressed, and how, it's more of a kind of thing to be maintained and dealt with, as opposed to like a death sentence these days for the most part. And in particular, a current project that I lead at work right now, we have been tracking chemotherapy drugs and new chemotherapy drugs that come on the market.
Do you want the panelists or the attendance? Participant is 76.
Okay, sorry.
No.
Are you on mute?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, I am now.
And so we had been tracking, I know all the FDA approvals for cancer drugs, once a month for the last 6 or 7 years as part of my project. And I remember at the beginning of the project, there might be one approved per month, maybe 1 or 2 per month. And by the time I was diagnosed, we were having to keep track of multiple 10s and 20s approvals and combination therapies and all these advanced therapies. And, I thought, what a time to be diagnosed. I mean, of course, no one ever wants to be diagnosed, but I felt very lucky, and I was very grateful for this experience, because I knew how much cancer treatment had progressed throughout the years, especially since I'd been doing my research. And I thought, it's going to be okay. I'm better off being diagnosed today than I was yesterday or the day before or the day before. And I used my experience kind of as a researcher and then as a patient to kind of play off of one another. And I got a really good perspective of what high quality care and good access to care means from the patient perspective, whereas before I had been looking at it from a research perspective. And it was just really interesting. I talked to my providers all throughout my treatment. I had chemotherapy, radiation therapy, surgery, and then I was in a clinical trial for about a year for another chemotherapy drug. And all throughout my experience, I talked to my doctors about my research. And my surgeon actually ended up being a consultant for me on a current project that I lead with the CDC, where we're looking at racial disparities between white and African American women on access to screening for mammography and then their outcomes. And so I feel very, very grateful for my experience. I've met so many great people along the way. I've been able to use my experience as a patient to further my research and to continue trying to help people nationally get better access to care and to help providers figure out how to best measure what is high quality care. Because frankly, there's some pretty lousy care out there, but there's also some really great care. And like I said, I'm very grateful for my experience as a patient that's going to help me continue my research to just help people improve and get better care and help hospitals figure out what's the best way to measure good care. And now as a patient, I have a better, broader perspective of what I can recommend be measured as high quality care after having gone through it myself. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I still obviously am in touch with my providers, and they're helping me along with my research as well. So it's just kind of all coming full circle. And that is my story.
Thank you so much, Pamela. All right, next up, we're going to have Joe.
Thank you. Like I said, my name is Joe Bullock, and I'm actually a neighbor of Pamela's. I live in Durham, North Carolina. I'm a stage 3B colorectal cancer survivor. And I have a little bit of a history with cancer. In my 20s, I actually had a scare with testicular cancer. I was actually born with an undescended testicle and didn't realize that that could be a precursor to testicular cancer. Luckily, at that point in my life, there was no cancer that was to be found. And then, like most men, I kind of put off getting a physical and finally got around to probably into my mid-30s, went to get a physical, and turned out that the person I was actually getting my physical from was my dad's doctor. And they noticed on my health record that I did not include prostate cancer. And it turned out that my dad was actually diagnosed with early onset prostate cancer, which I didn't know at the time. So at that point in my life, I started getting my DREs and my PSAs checked for prostate cancer. But once again, no cancer was found. It wasn't until I was actually the caregiver for my dad, who was dying from prostate cancer. And probably about a month before he passed away, I started having some signs of colorectal cancer. I was having some blood in my stool, what I thought was like hemorrhoids, irregular bowel movements, unusual weight loss. Some of those signs were coming, and at the time I thought it was just stress and dealing with being a caregiver. And a lot of times as caregivers, we kind of deny, our symptoms. And it wasn't until after he passed away that I actually finally got to a doctor and got screened and found out, and this is around May of 2018, that I was diagnosed officially with colorectal cancer at stage 3B. I ended up having, they found a 7-centimeter tumor inside my colon. I ended up having a foot of my colon removed. I ended up having a colon resection, and then I ended up doing 6 months of chemotherapy. And during that whole process, I started reaching out online a little bit. I got to know of somebody in a group called Colon Town, who had been a great support to me, and his name was Charles Griffin Jr. And he really challenged me. He said, "You're stage 3. You're really going to get beyond this. Your cancer is totally curable. But when you do get to that point, really reach out and use your voice." And so, unfortunately, after I had gotten to that point in February of 2019, when I got that NED, that no evidence of disease, I went through a period where really I just felt, even through chemo, now through chemo, I did also feel some depression and dark days of chemo. And so I went to therapy. And that was really helpful. But then after I got to NED, I went through another kind of stint of just having some more depression, and got through that. I was almost like I was mourning my cancer. And then I found out in February 2019 that my friend Charles Griffin Jr. that I mentioned to you, had actually passed away. And I remember what I had told Charles is that I would start using my voice and support men going through cancer. Like I would, because typically men don't like to do the health checks and don't like to get screenings. And so he encouraged me to do that. So after he passed away, I remember I hadn't fulfilled that promise. And so I met a friend of mine named Trevor Maxwell through the group Town. And we started the howling place for men at manaftercancer.com to give men a place to howl, to gather resources, to have a place to talk about their cancer and talk about the emotional turmoil that cancer can bring to you. And that has been a part of my journey as a cancer patient and a survivor. I also learned, when I was diagnosed at age 50, I was automatically told, even by my general practitioner, that colon cancer was, oh, you're 50. That just happens when you get older. And I quickly learned, because we know, and we're learning, that colon cancer is going to be the #1 killer amongst young adults between the age of 20 and 49 by the year 2030. Those statistics are getting lower. I recently was able to reach out and support a child, a young man named Jaden Oakes, who actually was being treated here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, who was actually going through stage 4 colorectal cancer at 11 years old. Unfortunately, he passed away this past July at age 13. So, like someone was saying earlier, Christine was saying earlier, cancer has no age limits. There's no, you kind of have to throw it all away with cancer, because you never know what you're going to get it when you get it, honestly, these days. There's no age boundaries in cancer. So now where my story has been lending itself is being an advocate for just being a male cancer advocate, working with men who are going through cancer. But I've also had the opportunity to start something called Town Junior, which is also to support families emotionally that have a child going through colorectal cancer. And I've been working with about 14 families across the country whose all children are either stage 3 or stage 4 with colorectal cancer. And so I definitely see that. And one thing I do tell myself is that, cancer might be done with me as a survivor, but I'm definitely not done with cancer. And that's what my hopes and what I plan to pursue going forward also. So thank you for giving me the time to share my story.
Thank you so much, Joe. I just got chills with that. My parents would have definitely benefited from having that colorectal cancer support for families. And I went through it like 10 years ago at this point almost. Thank you. All right, so next up we have Carla. Carla, can you please unmute yourself and come on?
Sure. First, I would like to say thank you. Thanks to God for this opportunity. To all the GRYT Health team members, the sponsors that made this conference possible, and to all of you that are connected from all over the world. I have learned so much these past 3 days that there are no words to describe the gratitude that I feel. As Jessica said, my name is Carla Jimenez Perez, and I am truly honored to be here today with you, sharing part of my story and learning from each other's experiences. My journey began on February 5th, 2019. I decided to go back to do a semi-annual checkup because my husband checked ourselves back in November 17 because we wanted to become parents. We wanted to make sure that our health was well. So my doctor sent me, I went back in February, 2019. And I decided to do the semi-annual checkup because I was having evacuating with blood in my stool. My doctor sent me to do a regular blood test. And when I went back for the results, he said that everything was well. and that the only thing that was low, as usual, was my vitamin D. I explained to my doctor that I have blood in my stool. He replied that since I get constipation, most likely that was an hemorrhoid. I insisted and told him that I have blood in my stool for almost 2 weeks. I constantly persisted with the doctor. And after I told him that I will pay in cash if I needed to. Finally, he agreed to send me to do the stool examination. I did the test on a Friday, and by Monday, they called me to inform me that I needed to go to a gastroenterologist. After seeing my perfect and clean medical record, the gastroenterologist told me the same thing, that most likely I have a small hemorrhoid, and that only 1% of his patients at my age, 30 years old, have complications, and that was including family medical history, which I didn't have any other time. After going back and forth, I told him that I would pay in cash for my colonoscopy because I wasn't able to do it until I was 45 years old. Then he agreed to do the colonoscopy. And surprise, I have a 40 millimeter polyp. May 23rd, 2019, I received my biopsy results. I had cancer. The doctor told me not to worry. We caught it on time, and as you know, the polyp were removed during the colonoscopy. All my personal and professional scores changed instantly. I started to do millions of tests as soon as I finished my consultation the same day. They specially referred me to a surgeon. And here we go again, the constant battle. The surgeon told me that only 10% of his patients I only had 10% chance of the cancer coming back because the polyps were removed during the colonoscopy. And it wasn't necessary to do surgery. I did a lot of research before the appointment, and I told him to please do the surgery because I needed to be extra sure. And I told him that I was just part of the 1% that supposedly my gastroenterologist told me that I was not going to be part of. I followed my intuition and I persisted. And then the surgeon asked me for permission to discuss my case at the tumor board. 2 weeks later, they decided finally to schedule the surgery for my colon. My surgery was done August 23rd, 2019. In September 11, 2019, I was declared cancer-free. All I needed to do was to follow up with blood tests and other tests every month at the beginning, and then it was changed for every 3 months, and I did exactly as he asked. On March 12, 2020, I was given permission to conceive. That was one of the main goals that my husband and I had for 2019, become a parent. It was the happiest day of my life. I dreamed about it since I was 8 years old. I wanted to happen when I was 30 years old. Sorry. I planned that day since I was 8 years old, as I mentioned. because somehow I knew that I was going to be physically, mentally, and financially ready for it. But on October 19, 2020, when I went for my MRI to do my annual checkup, I'm so sorry, I got a phone call from the surgeon, and he told me that the cancer spread to other parts of my body. Yes, through a phone call. One more time, our plans had changed drastically. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do or expect. I asked to give me guidance because I felt so many emotions. And with tears in my eyes, I told the surgeon, I am ready. What is next? I started to do so many tests, some of which I never experienced before, like PET scan, genetic tests, and the list go on and on. October 29, I was informed that I was going to receive 12 cycles of chemotherapies. So I contacted the fertility doctor, and I only have 30 days to do my treatments because the doctor didn't want to take any chance of this cancer spreading anywhere else. I was doing all the necessary procedure tests for the cancer that metastasized to my liver. And at the same time, I was doing 2 fertility tests back to back. Once to freeze my embryo, November 11, 2020, and one to freeze my eggs, November 23rd. From December 1st to February 10th, I took 6 chemotherapies. And I saw my body changing drastically with all the side effects from the chemo. March 15, 2021, I have my second surgery. 80% of my liver and my gallbladder was removed. I recovered 1 month and started 6 more cycles of chemotherapies. Thanks to God, and to God is the glory, August 30th, I was declared in remission. My families and friends gave me the peace of mind, the strength, the serenity, the wisdom, hope, patience with the treatments, surgery, and the changes in my body, and most important, faith. I am forever grateful. Now I am doing CT scans, MRIs, blood work every 3 months. I am looking forward to having clearance from my care providers to start our fertility treatment, even though I can, thanks God, have a natural pregnancy. Please, to all of you, know that you are not alone. There's someone out there is experiencing your current situation, whatever it may be, health, finance, relationship. Seek out for help if you need it. Please don't be afraid. And please, 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 listen to your body signs. Don't be afraid. Our bodies speak to us, but sometimes we are too busy and we don't listen. Don't assume and misdiagnose yourself, or be okay with a doctor misdiagnosed. Only God and yourself know and feel what's going on in your body 100%. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry that I got emotional. May God to continue to bless all of you, give you the serenity, the strength, the patience with your body in any situation that you may be experiencing now. But most important, know that you are never alone. I love you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carla. And please Don't apologize for getting emotional. We were all emotional right alongside with you. It's a very powerful story. Thanks for sharing. Up next, we have Boyd. Boyd, if you could unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay, that was awesome. So I was thinking back to 2016. It was the first year that I ran the Boston Marathon. And as I was approaching the finish line, I saw this really big dude, and he was laboring and he was struggling. And I reached over and I gave him a punch in the arm. I said, dude, it's the bleeping Boston Marathon, let's do this. And he said, you know what, you're right. And so I wore my Luke Skywalker shirt from Star Wars at Disney, because I felt like it gave that man hope, and I hope that my story gives you guys hope today. On Canada Day in July of 2011, which was 10 years ago, my wife and I had 3 kids in 6 years, and I wasn't feeling well. My wife said, you should go to the doctor. And so I went to the doctor. Thank God I listened to her. Long story short, it was acute myeloid leukemia. It was AML 6-9. It was the worst possible leukemia the doctors had ever seen. I'm in Canada, I should clarify. And needed a stem cell transplant to live the year. I had blood cancer twice in 8 months, brain and spinal cord trauma. I had enough chemotherapy to put down a small horse and 5 rounds of radiation. My life-saving stem cell transplant was May of 2012, and came home from that and suffered a spinal cord injury. I thought that my life was over, and in 2013, a friend approached me and ran a marathon for me in Alaska, of all places. And it changed my life. I bought a pair of shoes and started running. I really didn't want to run a marathon, but my wife's like, you know what? Disney's been great to us. Why don't you go run the Disney Marathon? So that was my first marathon, was at Disney. 200 doctor's appointments on average a year I was going to. The last session that was about SHYT happens. That was me, fatigue, brain trauma, chiropractor, doctor, on it goes. And eye problems. And so anyways, I'm an athlete with disabilities, and, you know, we try to celebrate life. I ran the Boston Marathon 3 times under the Athletes with Disabilities program. I thought that was like the highlight. And then my daughter's, she's the youngest, her kindergarten teacher said, oh, would you come share your story? Well, all the kids were way more interested in this Disney Marathon medal than the Boston Marathon. I mean, I even saw my niece, Sophie, who was like 8, and she's like, oh, a unicorn. I'm like, no, it's the Boston Marathon. So anyways, all that to say, I was pretty excited to get Mickey ears from the Disney Marathon. And I've run the Disney Marathon twice. And so 7 marathons in 7 years. Oh, wow. You'd think I'd never told my story before. Okay, so the guy that saved my life, this is the craziest part, is an American serviceman, and his name is Nathan Barnes. Nathan is and was in the US Navy. He was stationed in Japan. The US Navy paid to fly this guy from Japan to the National Stem Cell Center in apparently Washington, DC area. A nurse came, took this guy's stem cells, saved my life, all these things. I'm like, been wanting to meet Nathan. And he's in active service, right? This guy is from Dakota. It's wild to have the DNA of an American serviceman, and I'm this Canadian. And so anyways, the ship that he was on was moved around the world, and it eventually landed in Florida because everything special happens in Florida. And so I said, we got to do this. And so it was actually 2 years ago in November that I met Nathan for the first time. Disney does everything well. You can Google it if you're interested. Boyd Dunleavy, Disney, meeting Nathan. It was an amazing moment. Super special. I guess the last thing that I'll finish with, my first marathon was at Disney in 2015, and somebody said, "Boyd, you got to go to CancerCon." I'm like, that's a great idea. But, you know, with a traumatic brain injury, you can hide your own Easter eggs, and ideas come and go. So anyways, all these years later, literally like 2 weeks ago, I'm like, I wonder about that CancerCon. And I Googled it, and oh my gosh, you guys had this thing. And so the other highlight for me was marathons are really hard. I love half marathons. But I really felt like God wanted me to run 2 marathons in the last 2 months. And then I did that. And then I didn't even know that this was thing. So now I can say I've run 9 marathons in the 9 years since my life-saving stem cell transplant. I do this for people that can't. I do it for my stem cell donor, Nathan. I do it for my kids. I do it for my family. I do it for my wife. And I'm doing it for you guys. So thanks so much, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Boyd. That was great. I'm going to put a little information in the chat about CancerCon for those of you who want to know about it. And then up next, we have Milagros. If you could unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, my name is Milagros. I'm in Virginia. I actually will always be a New Yorker, but formerly from New York. Note the accent. I am an ovarian cancer and uterine cancer survivor. I came about it kind of slowly. It seems to be the running theme that it's hard to get a diagnosis at times. I started experiencing symptoms unbeknownst to me in 2019, and I couldn't really describe it, and no one could really kind of pinpoint it. In August of 2019, I started a new job teaching 2nd grade. And I'm not sure if you know, but teachers have a really hard time finding subs, and it's kind of frowned upon to take off. And what I did notice as a new Virginian, that doctors kept hours like banks. And it was really hard to wiggle around it. I ended up getting kind of piecemeal care between urgent care and emergency room visits. The symptoms became worse and worse. Actually, one time, and I would talk to my school nurse, and my school nurse would be like, "You got to advocate for yourself. You have to advocate for yourself," every time I spoke to someone. And it got to the point that one day I got so sick teaching my class that I ended up calling and saying, "Someone help me." They sent me up to the nurse, and kind of kudos to my school nurse and principal. As I was kind of puking in a garbage can, my principal was rubbing my back, and the nurse was calling 911. They still didn't find what it was. As you know, I'm a chubby chick. So everything from it's your heart, it's your stomach. I did a colonoscopy. It was suggested maybe I was allergic to something, and I started removing items from my diet. It really didn't make a difference. So I decided, kind of stabbing in the dark, to go to the GYN. Well, it wasn't even picked up then. So in the conversation with the PA, I have teacher bladder, what a shocker. And she had referred me to one of the doctors in the practice. In the meantime, here in Virginia, I've noticed, and like I said, spoiled from New York, you would go to a doctor's office in New York and they would do the sono and all that all in one place, usually all in one day. But in Virginia, everything's kind of like you go to one place, you go to another. Well, COVID happened and I got lost in the mix. But I still had this appointment with the chief of surgery who was going to fix my bladder. But he took the time to read my records and he said, "You know what, I'd love to help you with this, but I think you have a more urgent issue." And when that occurred, he said, well, what he said to me was, "I think you really need a sono." So I said, "Okay, go for a sono," not really thinking much. And when I had the sono, he called me pretty much the next day and said, "We found a tumor on your ovary. I was completely shocked. I was like, what the heck is that? You know, why? So he immediately referred me to an oncologist, gynecological oncologist, who's been fabulous. I'm really happy with my care. But what I wanted to say most importantly, and obviously I was diagnosed later on. I'm a BRCA2 survivor as well for the ovarian. But I wanted to say that my takeaways from this is, and I wanted to share with you my takeaways, is that you've got to advocate for yourself, push. Even if you're a chubby chick like me, it isn't always about the fatness. So say, hey, I'm not feeling right. 2, nurses can help you advocate for yourself. I had 6 rounds of chemo, and after chemo 3, I felt terrible. And I really wanted to stop everything. I just felt awful. And I kind of lost it in front of my nurse at the infusion. But let me tell you, Nurse Jackie ran like nobody's business and got me all the help I needed, medication to kill the pain. My legs like tree trunks, because up to that point, I was told just take Tylenol. Someone mentions Tylenol to me, I actually like twitch because it wasn't helping. And I'm grateful for Nurse Jackie for advocating for me. And she taught me that I had to advocate, that I had choices. But a couple other things that I also wanted to tell you was, and I'm not sure, and I'm not pushing this on anyone, but I found that faith was really supportive. I was teaching virtually during this time, but I found the time to pray and to kind of look into my faith and say, this is the one that, or this is what's going to help me through this. And it did. It gave me a serenity, even with the hurdles. I also learned that being positive and being happy helps. Those 2 things together have been proven scientifically to help survivors get through this. And I forgot to mention, we've been using Survivor, but I like to use Warrior. We are fighting a battle. However, we're going to win, and we're going to come together as a group as we have these past couple of days. And I have been so blessed to have so many people join me in this battle. Even with all the obstacles, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I have great hope. I'm on a PARP inhibitor. My doctor is really happy with my progress. And I know in the back of my head, things could happen. I'm realistic, but I know that as long as I'm positive and have faith and surround myself with amazing people and go to like a zillion support groups, but that's me. I'm a teacher. That's how we flow. And I look in those wonderful, beautiful faces that I teach, and they inspire me the most, along with my own 2 boys, her in their 20s and they're a little sketchy, but I still love them dearly. And believe it or not, and I forgot to mention, I'm a caregiver as well. My mom has Alzheimer's. So helping someone go through a disease along with my dad and going through a disease, it is not impossible. Nothing is impossible as long as you believe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Milagros. That was great. Very inspirational. I love all the comments in the chat. Keep it up, everyone. And last but certainly not least, we have Bikara. Could you unmute and join us?
Sure. The aroma of disinfectant clung to the air, sterile. I steadied my steps, trying not to show my fear, and knowing to my mother standing beside me. I was a Davis woman, proud, strong, and fierce. The fortitude of my ancestors swelled inside of me. I straightened my shoulders, steadied my gaze, and spoke. But the voice that emerged was not my own. It was a distant whisper, the whisper of a frightened little girl. My name is Bakira Radcliffe, and I'm here for a biopsy. There, it was out. Biopsy. My soul knew what the outcome of the day would be, even if I didn't want to accept it. I was about to enter cancer land. Just the day before, the doctor, this rock star specialist, assured my mother that I was experiencing medical student disease. And clinically, he suspected nothing was wrong with me. But I knew. For months, the words had been swirling around on the page as I attempted my studies. I was too tired to socialize with my classmates or attend any study groups. Something was wrong. Prior to flying across the country to be dismissed as hysterical, I heard that still small voice inform me of the journey ahead. Cancer, it said. So despite this rock star not believing me, I knew. And then the floor shook and we heard a boom. Being this close to Washington, D.C., I see the panic in everyone's eyes. Suddenly, we no longer care that we're sitting in a waiting room waiting to enter cancer land. We think collectively at the same time, terrorist attack. Because what else could it be? Then, as things begin to settle and the televisions come back on, it's confirmed. An earthquake. What? An earthquake in Maryland? I just left Southern California. And then I heard them call my name. As the nurse spoke to me, my world shook again. This time figuratively, as the rock star specialist had taken it upon himself to cancel my biopsy without informing me. I was livid. I heard the call of my ancestors rise up in rebellion, and I called everyone I knew working at the hospital. You see, the rock star didn't know something about me. I was connected. I knew a few people, and I could shake the ground too. Within 30 minutes of my calls, the nurse informs me the biopsy is back on, and she has to go find the rock star. He's gone for the day. I tell her, I'll wait. They locate the rock star, and the moment is here. I'm lying on the table. The rock star comes in the room and barely looks at me. He numbs the site and takes a sample. The cytopathologist is in the room, and I hear their whispers. Cancer, metastatic, surgery, advanced. The rock star looks down at me and tells me to place an ice pack on the site and that he will schedule surgery right away and the cancer is already spread. That's how I was told. The ground shakes, an aftershock, and I laugh, saying, "Aren't you glad you weren't sticking a needle in me right now?" No one laughs. There's silence. There's enormous gravity in the room. I turn to my mom, who is holding it together by sheer will, and I say to her, "I am okay." She smiles and says nothing will ever be the same again. The ground shakes as her words emerge. I listen for the angel's trumpet because I know this must be the second coming of Christ. The earthquake on the East Coast, a rock star doctor completely wrong about a diagnosis, and little old me in the middle of it. This must be the end times. Yet, here I am, 10 years after that moment, a cancer thriver, a pandemic parent, a nonprofit founder, and no rapture yet. My story of not being believed and dismissed is common in the BIPOC cancer community, partially due to medical bias. As a result, I founded United Colors of Cancer, a nonprofit whose goal is to increase the survivorship of the BIPOC cancer community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bakira. That was wonderful. Thank you to all of our speakers today. I I'm gonna just put us all on screen so you can unmute and say goodbye. All right, so everyone can see everyone now. So thank you again so much for telling your story. And if anyone in our audience is interested in sharing their story, there's a link in the chat where you can submit those. We do a Tell Your Story event every year at the Global Virtual Cancer Conference. So feel free to submit them. And around October of next year, we'll be picking more people to go. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart, everyone, so much again for sharing your stories. Just a reminder, the next session, when this Zoom is closed, go back to GVCC21.com, log in, and from the homepage, you'll find a Join Now button underneath the Happening Now section. And this will take you to the next live session, which is going to be a meeting format. So you'll be able to be on screen, but please make sure you're muted. If you're called on, you can unmute to talk. And we have a comedian and magician, and then we will go into some group time together. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.